So the objective as given by MCI is in this order: telomere, telomerases and their clinical significance, then explain various gene mutations with suitable examples, and then describe the various mechanisms involved in the regulation of gene expression in prokaryotes and comparative features of eukaryotic gene regulation. But we will not be doing this in this order. We will be taking up the last SLO first. So today we will be dealing with describing the various mechanisms involved in the regulation of gene expression. And then we'll, in the next lecture, which is I guess on Friday, we'll be having explaining the gene mutations and telomeres. So we'll try and cover as much of gene expression regulation today. So what do you understand by regulation of gene expression? Organisms, they alter expression of genes in response to genetic developmental cues or programs. So when life starts, and it starts from a single cell. So as it progresses and divides into and forms a multicellular organism, so the cells has to differentiate, and these differentiations are given by the genetic developmental cues or programs. And coming to prokaryotes, or even for us eukaryotes also, when we have some environmental changes, our body responds accordingly. So it's not that all the time we are synthesizing insulin, right? It's only when we have a meal and after that the insulin is released. So that environmental trigger that we have taken food will make us synthesize and release insulin. Similarly, any disease like now the COVID-19 is so rampant. So that disease is also inducing certain changes, which may not be beneficial for the organism also at times. Like for in COVID-19, it can happen that the response itself might kill the patient. Like cytokine storm, which happens. But most of the time, the aim of the organism is to bring about a change in the genetic expression, which will help the organism fight the challenge, environmental challenge. So, and how is it done? It is done by modulating the amount both spatially and temporally, means in time, and also at the same time, some may be increased, some may be decreased. So why is it necessary? Because as you know that the entire DNA is same in all the cells, but it is not necessary that all the genes should fire at the same time. All the proteins has to be synthesized. If that would happen, then it would create havoc in the organism, both in the unicellular and the multicellular. So the bacterial genome has 4,000 genes, and we have about 35,000. So that is again controversial. Like it varies from 25,000 to some book says it's 30,000. So let us take an average of 30,000 genes, and these genes, if they produce more than 30,000 proteins, they produce enormous proteins. That is because of the post-transcriptional regulations. But only a fraction of all these genes are expressed in a cell at a time. Let's take my favorite example, insulin. So imagine what will happen if all the cells in the body start synthesizing insulin. So the organism will immediately die of hypoglycemia. Now, gene expression can be basically divided into two types. One is constitutive and the other is inducer. So constitutive genes are those which are always expressed and they are not under any regulation. So they are required for the normal functioning of the cells, like the structural genes. So these are known as the housekeeping genes, on some enzymes also, like glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. So irrespective of whatever the cell is facing, it will keep on producing that, or beta actin, a structural one. So these are known as housekeeping genes. So they are mostly not under any kind of regulation. Whereas the majority of the genes are inducibles, whose expression can be switched on or off. So and also you can regulate the expression. Regulate the expression means at what rate the mRNA is being produced. That can be regulated. So you have to keep, while understanding this lecture, you have to keep in mind the central dogma. So it's DNA, from DNA transcription to mRNA, and then from mRNA translation to protein. So at each step, the expression can be regulated. Of expression, it is the total amount of protein which is present at a particular point of time. So that is the end point. So our main aim, or the entire organism main aim, is to regulate the amount of protein, and that is what is meant by regulation of gene expression. So that can be done at various levels, like in this one. This figure has been taken from Leninger. So you can see so as I said, the central dogma, the gene, from the gene, the primary transcript, then mature mRNA, and then the protein. So our net concern is what is the amount of protein is there at a particular point of time. So that is what is gene expression. So how can you regulate this? You can regulate this at various steps. So Leninger here mentioned 7 steps. The transcription, post-transcriptional processing, and then the mature mRNA, how long it stays. So the stability of the mature mRNA, when it is degraded, how fast it is degraded. So that will also determine what is the net amount of protein. Then how effectively this mRNA is being translated to protein, that will also determine. And then once the protein is formed, how long it stays. So that will also decide the net amount of protein. So post-translational processing and how fast it is degraded, that will also contribute in regulating the gene expression. So now there are 3 types of signals. So this figure has been taken from Harper. So there are 3 types of signals. So one is where the gene expression continues to be high as long as the signal is present. So that is type A. As long as the signal is there, you have a high protein level. This is mostly seen in most of the genes, like the enzymes and which are involved in metabolic pathways. Now in type B, you can see that even if the signal is only a spike of expression, then it comes back to normal. So this kind of signal is seen mostly in the embryonic stage, when a particular protein has to be expressed for a brief period of time so that the cell differentiates in a particular direction. And similarly, type C is also seen in those cells where a small signal will trigger the expression of a protein which will continue despite if the signal stops. So even a small period of that signal is there, the protein will keep on continuing expression. So these are the 3 types, type A, B, and C of signals. Now, what is the signals? The environmental cues which we get from outside or sometimes from inside the cell also, when the cell is developing. We will see what are those signals and how they. So you have already read about transcription factors. So those plays a very important role in regulation of gene expression. Now we'll first deal with regulation of gene expression in prokaryotes. Prokaryotes genome, as you know, is much smaller than the eukaryotes, and they have to efficiently carry out the coordinated expression of genes. For example, if 3 enzymes are required for a pathway, they have to express it in equal amounts. Now, this kind of regulation is much more complex in eukaryotes. So we do not have, we have separate genes in separate chromosomes for the same pathway, and that is regulated in a complex manner. But in case of prokaryotes, most often the genes involved in the metabolic pathway are often present in a linear array called an operon. So in this operon, the cistron is the smallest unit of genetic expression. What does it mean? That one cistron will code for one particular protein. So a single mRNA that encodes more than one separately transferred protein is referred to as polycistronic mRNA, and the gene is polycistronic gene. Now you better understand when you look at this figure. So this is the lac operon. So as you can see, this have an array of 3 genes which are placed one after another: the lac Z, lac Y, and lac A. Lac Z synthesizes beta-galactosidase. Lac Y is for permease, and lac A is transacetylase. What do they do? Beta-galactosidase is involved in digesting lactose, so it will actually leave the lactose into glucose and galactose. And lac Y, permease, allows or carries the lactase inside. Lac A is transacetylase, which can acetylate other galactosides other than lactose. So it's this exact function of transacetylase is not yet known. So we have to see what is the role of this that is under research. But beta-galactosidase, it leaves lactose, and permease, it allows entry of lactose into the cell. Now this 3 enzymes or proteins which are involved in lactose metabolism in bacteria are in the form of an operon, that is, they are continuous to each other. Now this protein, the repressor protein. Then there is a CR response, and then we have the promoter, and one is the operator. So you what you have to remember is this entire thing is sequence of DNA. So a sequence of DNA is the promoter to which transcription factors come in and start the transcription of these genes. Operator is an overlapping sequence of promoter which will control whether the units. So these repressor subunits can bind on the operator. So I don't know whether DNA binding domains have been covered or not. So a protein can bind to a specific sequence of DNA by okay, I'm getting questions like आवाज सही नहीं आ रहा है. Is it okay now? Is the sound clear? Okay, from when did I lose audio? Which part do you want? Can you hear me now properly? Okay, so this has three segments, gene segments: LAC-Z, LAC-Y, and LAC-A. LAC-Z is involved in synthesizing beta-galactosidase, which cleaves lactose, into glucose and galactose. LAC-Y is synthesizes permeases, which brings in lactose into the bacteria, and LAC-A is involved in synthesizing trans-acetylase, which can acetylate other galactosides. Its exact role is not known. Okay, now this is the regulatory region where we have a gene LAC-I, which is a constitutive gene and it continuously synthesizes a repressor molecule which can bind to the operator region, which is again a DNA sequence on a promoter. So promoter, you have to remember this, all these are DNA sequences. Now the promoter sequence has an overlapping operator sequence where the repressor proteins can bind, and it prevents the RNA polymerase to bind to the promoter and transcribe these genes. Now this CRE will see what is the need for this. So this is how the operon works. So there are three situations when there is no lactose. First situation is when there is no lactose. If there is no lactose, there is no need to use the lactazine or the lactose metabolizing proteins, because bacteria wants to save its energy. So nature doesn't want to waste energy in synthesizing genes which are not required. So what will happen? This LAC-I gene will produce the repressor subunits. As I said, that this one is a constitutive gene and not under regulation. This will continuously produce the protein. Now, these four repressor subunits and form a tetramer and to the operator, where it will treat the gene will not be transcribed. So, but there is another situation where both glucose and lactose is available. So, in that case, what would the bacteria preferably do? The bacteria will try to metabolize glucose because that is an easier source of energy. Because so it will still not want to turn on the lac operon. So even though the repressor subunits are now bound with the inducer, that is lactose. So in case of this, the inducer is a modified form of lactose which is known as allolactose. So this allolactose can bind to the repressor and prevents it binding to the operator site. So technically, RNA polymerase should bind and start synthesizing the genes, but still it requires another positive inducer so that the RNA polymerase can efficiently bind to the promoter. So that here comes the cap response element, the role of cap response element. So now is the situation where the glucose is low and lactose is high. So what now the bacteria should start producing its lactose metabolizing proteins so that can lactose as the source of energy because glucose is not there. So what is now the difference? How does it sense that glucose is less? That is because low glucose will cyclic MP because high glucose inhibits adenine cyclase and cyclic MP is not produced. So cyclic MP can bind to the catabolite activator protein, catabolite activator protein, which forms a combination, and this can bind to the CRE, the response element. And when this one binds to the CRE, it now allows RNA polymerase to efficiently bind to the promoter, and then it can transcribe the mRNA. What you have to appreciate is that the whole mRNA is transcribed as a continuous stretch, and this is known as the polycistronic mRNA. However, the translation is separate. It is not that the entire protein is formed as a single stretch and then cleaved into three separate proteins. Each protein has its own stop codon, and therefore they are translated separately. The beta-galactosidase, permease, and the transacetylase, they are transcribed separately. Now, this is an example of another operon in the bacteria, which is involved in producing enzymes which are involved in tryptophan synthesis. So here the activator is tryptophan, the repressor is tryptophan. So if there is excess of tryptophan, will bind to the tryptophan repressor, which is being produced by similar to LAC-I gene we did in the previous operon. And when it binds to the tryptophan repressor, it brings about a structural change which allows it to bind to the operator region and prevent RNA polymerase to bind. But this method is not enough to completely stop the transcription of the tryptophan gene. I mean, tryptophan synthesizing enzyme gene, or the tryptophan operon. So here there is another region which is the leader region. So this sequence is all transcribed. Regulatory region, the previous operation you saw that it is not transcribed. Here the leader segment is also transcribed, and in this sequence lies a attenuator sequence which will help in breaking the transcription, which will stop the transcription at and prevent the translation of these genes. So there are these 5 genes are in the tryptophan operon. You don't need to remember this part, the enzymes which are involved. So what you just need to know that these 5 gene segments, they synthesize proteins which are involved in tryptophan metabolism, the synthesis of tryptophan. So now let us examine the leader sequence. So if you see, the leader sequence have 4 segments marked separately, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I would like you to pay attention to this one segment where you can see there are 2 codons which code for the tryptophan amino acid. Now let us see the situation where tryptophan is abandoned. What will happen? The ribosome, which is synthesizing the protein. So first there is transcription, and in bacteria you have to remember that transcription and translation, it occurs simultaneously. So when it is being transcribed and it has gone to, it is transcribed the leader sequence, the translation already starts. Now in case tryptophan is excess, where tryptophan is excess, these 2 codons will be quickly translated and the ribosome moves on to the segment 2 of the RNA. Now this leaves 3 and 4 free to form a hairpin-like loop, which indicates end of transcription to the RNA polymerase. So the RNA polymerase now leaves it and it makes it a hairpin loop. So the transcription stops at the end of the letter sequence, that is here. So transcription stops here if tryptophan levels are high, because this has been translated quickly and it has taken up 2 also. The ribosome covers up the segment 2 in the leader sequence. Now what will happen if tryptophan is less? If tryptophan is less, the translation will stall here because tryptophan is not available to that extent. So 2 and 3 will now be free to form a loop, and it will prevent the formation of the attenuator loop between 3 and 4, and the transcription will continue. Remember, the key here is formation of an hairpin loop by 3 and 4. So when 3 and 4 forms a hairpin loop, it gives a signal to the RNA polymerase to stop transcription of the tryptophan mRNA, the operon mRNA. So to prevent this to form, the 2 has to be free to form a loop with 3. So 3 is now involved with 2, and now this loop formation doesn't give us signal to the RNA polymerase to stop. So the entire tryptophan regulated genes are now transcribed and they will be translated to the protein. So now we move on to regulation of gene expression in eukaryotes. So if you now again go back to the central dogma, the different levels at which the gene can be regulated is regulation at DNA level by modifying the DNA, regulation at the level of transcription. This is the most important and most efficient, because you do not produce the mRNA. So if you don't want the protein, why to produce the mRNA? So most of the regulation occurs at this step. Then after transcription also you can regulate to certain amount, depending upon you get new cues that now you have to stop the protein. So even after transcription you may need to regulate. Then at the level of translation, whether that mRNA has to be translated or not, that at that stage also you can regulate. Then differential expression of a parental allele of a gene. So again, this is a part of the regulation at the DNA level. So let us now take up each one at a time. So regulation at the DNA level is, first thing, if you change access to DNA, like the RNA polymerase has to access the DNA to transcribe. So if you change that access, so that again you have read in DNA packaging. So the chromatin, how tightly the DNA is packaged, that will decide whether it is accessible to the RNA polymerase to transcribe on. So heterochromatin, as you know, is tightly packed with histone and it cannot be accessed. So most of the non-expressing genes are present in the form of heterochromatin. So your insulin gene in your skin cell will be again in the region of heterochromatin, which is tightly packed. Whereas those which are expressing, so the same insulin gene in your pancreas beta cells will be in the euchromatin region. And this can be changed by histone acetylation. So certain genes may be packaged and not expressing and may get a cue that now you have to start expressing. So that packaging can be changed by acetylating the histone. Acetylating the histone will lead to decrease in the positive charge of the histone and will loosen up the DNA. Because DNA, as you know, histone DNA interaction is based on the positive negative charge. Then also the promoter, if it is methylated, so there are certain CG regions in the promoter, cytosine and guanosine side by side. Wherever it is present, the cytosine can be methylated, and once it is methylated, the efficiency of the promoter decreases. So it is okay. Thank you. Thank you. So another way is gene amplification. So the same gene can be amplified to produce more of that protein. So the example is dihydrofolate reductase, as you have read about methotrexate and resistant to methotrexate. Then genes can be rearranged so that the same set of genes can produce different types of proteins in different cells. You learn more about this when we study about immunoglobulins, gene rearrangements. Then there are the mobile DNA elements like the transposons. So when they move from one place to another, as you know, if it comes under the regulation of a promoter which is highly active, then the gene expression of that particular gene will change. The rate of expression will change. The regulation at the level of transcription, like the transcription factors. Transcription factors, as you know, it can bind to the promoter region or the enhancer region and change the expression of the genes. So covalent modification of the transcription factors will determine how efficiently it is binding to the promoter or the enhancer. So there are binding domains which interact with other proteins also. So I hope the DNA binding domains and the protein binding domains have been covered. If not, I will take it up in my next class. So can you please respond whether the binding domains have been covered or not? Okay, so you can later on respond to me. Okay, there Pragya said that it's not covered. So I'll be taking up in the next class. So briefly, there are three kinds of domains. The zinc finger, the helix turn helix domain, and the leucine zipper motif. So what are these? These are basically different arrangements of the primary structure of the protein. in such a way that it can now bind the DNA at a particular sequence. So mostly the zinc finger and the helix turn helix domain of a protein. So you have to visualize an entire protein, the three-dimensional structure of a protein. So one part of the protein is arranged in an helix turn helix way, which can go and bind to the DNA. So these are the domains which allows the protein to bind to the DNA. So you have to remember these transition factors are proteins which now have to bind to the DNA that is in the promoter region or the enhancer region to regulate gene expression. So how do they bind? That is through these domains. The helix and helix, zinc finger domain. And then if you have seen the initiation in eukaryotes, you see that multiple transcription factors, some bind to each other, not directly to the DNA. So how do this protein bind to the other protein? So they also have separate domains for protein-protein interaction. So that is mostly the leucine Ziffer motif. So I will show you the figure because I don't have it right now. In the next class, I will again revise this part. So what you need to remember here is that there are specific structures in the protein of transcription factors which allows it to interact with the DNA as well as with other transcription factors. So these are trans-acting proteins. The transcription factors can be classified as trans-acting proteins because they are synthesized in genes which are far away and maybe in separate chromosomes altogether, and from there it can diffuse to the site where it needs to regulate a gene expression. So that's why they are known as trans-acting proteins. Whereas the promoter, operator, all the regulatory regions of the DNA is the cis-acting element because they are in the same orientation with the gene. Now another concept which has to be clear is the promoters and enhancers. The promoters is the regulatory region of the DNA which is just upstream to the gene which it is controlling. So it has to be in the same direction like 5' to 3' with the gene itself, and it is not very far away from the gene. Whereas enhancers can be situated close to the gene or thousands of base pairs away from the gene, and it is not necessarily oriented in the same direction. Like it can be 5' to 3' in the other in the complementary strand, or it can be downstream, whereas promoter is always upstream. So these differences between promoters and enhancers you have to remember because this is a very common question which is asked. Differentiate between promoters and enhancers. So these are the properties of enhancers which you need to remember. Work when located long distances from the promoter. So it can work even when upstream or downstream from the promoter. It can work when oriented in either direction. So it can work with the homologous or heterologous cells, and it can work by binding one or more proteins. It works by recruiting chromatin modifying co-regulatory complexes. And it works by facilitating binding function of the basal transcription complex and the cis-link promoter. So basically what it does is it will have a separate set of transcription factors which will come and bind to the enhancers, and these transcription factors along with the enhancer will interact with the basal transcription complex of the promoter. So at the promoter side there will be a set of transcription factors, at the enhancer side there will be a set of transcription factors, and this will somehow parent the DNA and come and interact with the promoter and ultimately regulate the gene expression. So to put it plainly, or to draw a corollary, you can understand it. Promoter is like the switch of a fan, whereas the enhancer is the regulator. So fine tuning of the promoter is done by the enhancer. So you have to keep in mind the differences between promoters and enhancers. So these are examples. This figure has been again taken from Harper. So these are examples of promoters C L enhancer, and this is the promoter of beta globin gene. So this is a viral island. It is not necessary that the enhancer has to be for the same gene. So it can work on the homologous gene or heterologous gene. It can work on some other gene. So it can be oriented in any direction. Even a separate promoter can work on another gene. So this is a thymidine. You can increase the expression of only the has to be direction and be based on the gene. Okay, now can you hear me? Is it clear now? Okay, is it clear now? So do you want me to repeat the previous slide? This one? Okay, so what I was highlighting in this figure is that these are the enhancers and this is the promoter. So the promoter, as you can see, it can be for the same gene or it can be for a different gene. So here you can see the promoter is different from the gene which it is controlling, whereas the enhancer also can be from the same gene or from the different gene, and the only thing is that promoter has to be in line or in the same orientation with the gene, and it has to be close to it, whereas the enhancer can be in the same direction, different direction, or it can be upstream, downstream, and it can work in both the ways. So that is what you need to remember. Now coming to regulation at post-transcriptional level. So there are different ways of doing it. So alternative promoters. So as I showed that different promoters can work for the same gene. So if a promoter which has high efficiency is put upstream to a particular gene, then obviously that gene expression will increase. That is what we saw when we dealt with carcinogenesis. If you remember that BCR-ABL promoter of immunoglobulin gene, if placed on top of a proto-oncogene, it will increase the synthesis of that gene so much that it will cause tumorogenesis in the cell. Similarly, polyadenylation site may be different. So from the same gene, two different size of proteins can be produced. If you remember when a mature mRNA is produced, poly-A tail is added. So there is a particular site where poly-A tail has to be added. Which site will be selected will determine the size of the protein. So these examples we'll again see when we do immunoglobulin. So from the same gene, soluble immunoglobulin can be produced, which will be secreted outside, or a membrane-bound immunoglobulin may be produced. So we will see about it when we do immunology. Similarly, alternative splicing can result in exclusion of an exon, and a different size of protein can be produced. Then RNA editing. So now this I'll deal with a little bit detail. So RNA editing is seen in case of ApoB100 and ApoB48. So if you remember, ApoB48 is involved with chylomicrons, which is synthesized in the intestine, whereas ApoB100 is with VLDL, which is synthesized in the liver. So it is the same gene produced both ApoB48 and ApoB100, but the RNA is edited. So once the RNA is produced, so if CAA, which codes for glutamine in ApoB100, if that is edited to form U, the C is deaminated from U, it codes a stop codon. So the translation stops here in case of ApoB48. So 48 stands for the 48%. It is not 48 number of nucleotides or 48 number of amino acids. It is 48% of ApoB100. So a stop codon is inserted in the mRNA by that is a unique example. Then the mRNA stability can also be altered by increasing nuclear RNases, which will cleave off the mRNA which is produced and not required. Then mRNA stability by binding to which can be modified depending upon whether that mRNA is required to be translated or not. So that can also be done. So we'll deal with it in the next slide. Then RNA interference is again another topic which I think will be taken up later. But briefly, the mRNA can be inhibited by double-stranded 25 nucleotide long small RNAs. Now these are of two types: microRNA, miRNA, or small interfering RNA, siRNA. miRNA or microRNA is usually endogenous in nature, which is synthesized within the cell, and siRNA or small interfering RNA is usually from external sources like viruses, or in therapeutics also we use. So what happens is this 25 nucleotide double-stranded RNA has a complementary to the mRNA. So it goes and binds to the mRNA, and either it prevents translation or it induces destruction of the mRNA. So that is how RNA interference works. It has to be dealt with in more detail. So that will be done later. In case of mRNA stability, we will see this example of transferrin receptor. This has been taken from Lippincott. You can go and see it in Lippincott. So what happens is, suppose, what does transferrin do? Transferrin transports iron and delivers it to the cell. Now, if the cell already has a lot of iron, so it doesn't need the iron to be taken from outside, so it will inhibit translation of the transferrin receptor. So transferrin will bring iron, bind to the transferrin receptor, it will be internalized, and the iron will be delivered inside the cell. Now, if iron is in excess, it doesn't want it to be synthesized. So when high iron is there, this iron responsive protein is degraded, and it doesn't bind to the mRNA of the transferrin receptors, and this mRNA is subjected to degradation. Only when iron is low, the IRP is high, iron response protein, and it binds to the untranslated region of the transferrin receptor mRNA and stabilizes it. So this is the coding region, and this is the untranslated region. It binds to it, and it stabilizes the mRNA. It prevents its degradation, and so more and more protein will now be translated from the same RNA. But if iron is in excess, even though the mRNA is synthesized, since there is no iron response protein which can bind to this, it will be degraded fast, and less of transferrin receptor will be produced. Then there is translational regulation. So the main method is phosphorylation of initiation factor 2. So this occurs in these situations where there is amino acid starvation, heme deficiency. So if there is heme deficiency in erythroblast, so obviously globin synthesis has to be decreased. So it will not translate the globin mRNA. So beta globin mRNA. So that is again done by phosphorylation. Or if there is presence of double-stranded RNA, which indicates viral infection, so then also it will try to shut down the translation machinery, the cell. Or if there is accumulation of misfolded proteins in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, indicating that there is some defect in protein synthesis, so again it will shut down the translation machinery in the cell and ultimately may trigger apoptosis in the cell. Now, finally, there is differential expression of a parental allele of a gene. So what happens is, as you know, we have a pair of chromosomes, so there are two alleles for the same gene. So gene can be regulated by allelic exclusion. So what happens is, one allele is not expressed at all. So this allelic exclusion is again seen, example is in immunoglobulins or the immunology, where the same pluripotent cells can either form a B cell which is synthesizing immunoglobulin, or it can form a T cell which is producing T cell receptors. So immunoglobulin and T cell receptors are almost similar in structure if you see, but these two different structures are produced by allelic exclusion. So details we will again see when we do T cell development in immunology. Then there is X chromosome inactivation. As you know that in females, in somatic cells, not in germline cells, in somatic cells, the X chromosome is inactive. One of the X chromosome is inactivated. So that is again a way of regulating gene expression. Then there is genomic imprinting. So genomic imprinting is very interesting. Here what happens is, there are certain genes whose alleles are active only when we receive either from the paternal side or the maternal side. So when the maternal allele is coming, it specifically gets methylated and imprinted, means it is not expressed at all. So that is how genomic imprinting takes place. So whenever an allele is from a maternal source, it is silenced, or it can be other way. If it is from the paternal source, it is again silenced. So you can find out examples of genomic imprinting. So by this we come to the end of expression regulation of gene expression. I know there were some hitches with the voice. I don't know what is the reason. So I'll try to find out the solution to that. So if you have missed something, if you haven't understood any part, so we have 5 minutes time. It's 10 o'clock already. So explain tryptophan operon. We'll do it in the next class. I think ma'am is waiting, para ma'am, for the next class. So we'll take up tryptophan, or you can WhatsApp me your questions. We'll take those up in the next class. The next class will be basically doing mutation and telomeres, so that we can shorten up a little, and we'll take up all those which has been missed due to the voice problem in this class. Is that okay? Hairpin part at this, yes, I will do Animesh. I'll do it in the next class. Thank you. So we'll end the webinar now, I guess.